Back in late 2021, I was a broke college student. I had at the time 4 courses at university, 2 of which among the most challenging in my degree, a full time job as a busser, and a wife who was also attending university. We were living at my in law's house, freshly married and full of dreams, none of which I was sure I could achieve. I still didn't know I wanted to get into my current career in game development at the time, but I knew I always loved games because of playing regular multiplayer games. Earlier that year was when I first heard of Celeste, bought it, and played it for the first time. But the reason why this game could resonate with me so much is a lot deeper. And to fully explain that, we need to go back to 2017. In winter 2017, a young man had just landed in Canada for the first time. Before that, I was living in Italy where I had friends that were more like family and an enviable life as a university student in southern Italy. I would go to classes in the morning, hang out with my friends in the evening, all day, every day. Perfect weather and a beautiful life. But then, my family, whom I visited once a year in my home country, had finally gotten the Canadian visa and I needed to move to Canada. However, because of a very long story, I could not actually live with them. My dad had handed me money enough for 2 months worth of rent and basically told me that I'm on my own now. I needed to find a job in a country where I didn't know anyone in the cold, cold Canadian winter on my own. 1 month passed, then the second, then the third, no job. I pleaded for more money from my dad and he gave it to me. After all, I was still an 18-year-old. Then I found a job in a call center and by then depression of living alone had settled in. I would do my best to mask that depression and act okay. And 1 week of training passed and then the second, and now I have to start working for real. I have to start taking calls. But at the end of the third week, I was told that I've been fired. And the supervisor told me that, you just look too depressed for this job. You cannot talk to people. Try manual labor instead and see if that helps. Maybe work in a factory or something. Back then, I was like, this is actually a decent idea. Less than a month later, I had found a job in a factory, and that's what began my true depression phase. From this point onward, I would like to give a viewer discretion for suicide. Working in the factory was okay. I would go, make the plastic bags, and come out to an empty house. Then wake up the next day, go to work, come back to an empty house. Nothing changed. At that time, I had a dream of becoming a game developer and had heard that Canada is one of the best places to achieve that. So I started looking in universities. I was also going through a really rough time because of losing all of my friends and others that I really cared about in Italy. That was one of the most stressful times of my life. I did not even understand what the word major meant, because that's not just the way that universities worked in Italy or even in my home country. I would stress all day, all the time about whether I'd be accepted or not. And for a year until I could apply to uni, I would stress every day about whether they'll accept my high school degree, whether I'll be able to fit in, whether I'll be able to see my friends again. I barely had enough money to get by, and suicidal thoughts had started getting a hold of me. At some point after I applied to university, I was extremely close to attempting to try, and I ended up not doing it, but one night after work, I went home to my empty apartment and held a sharp object. I decided to call the suicide hotline first to see what they might tell me to do, and if they could actually, you know, save me that night. But when I called, nothing, no one answered, and I just smiled for the first time in a while. And I couldn't express how I felt, but it felt kinda surreal that no one answered at all. And at that point, at that very point, I felt an absolutely insane feeling. Like this energy was just flowing through me. I felt optimistic about reaching my own goals for the first time in a while. I felt motivated like I have never felt before. Fast forward to 3 years later in early 2021, I had already started university, met the most beautiful woman in the world. Not only that, but we were also engaged. And it is then that I found out about Celeste. Then I was going through a different challenge, the challenge of maintaining my full-time job and full-time school. I was doing that because I needed enough money to pay for marriage as well as furniture and stuff for when we need to move in together. And slowly but surely, again under pressure, depression and suicidal thoughts started creeping in. Celeste is a game of all time. It's a quite difficult precision platformer that requires a lot of trial and error to get right. But what touched me about Celeste is not the gameplay, but rather the story. But it's also a game about a girl struggling with anxiety and depression. The girl in this game is called Madeline, and in order to overcome her anxiety and depression, she needs to overcome Madeline, her dark side, so to speak. So I would play this game when going through that phase in my life, and it honestly made me feel frustrated, but it would also make me feel accomplished, just enough to help push me through my days. I would finish chapter after chapter, and while doing that I would also submit some assignments or do some work that I had to do. Then we got married. And after we got married and got back to school and all that, I started firing up Celeste again. I hadn't finished it after all, but I was close. And in February 2022, roughly 6 months after we got married, I finally finished Celeste. I had finally reached the summit. And I didn't know what took me over then, but I cried. Finishing this game had reminded me of when I first came here, when I was, on the verge of doing it. And having another dark time reminded me of that as well. Finishing Celeste felt like an accomplishment that I needed at the time. Life is tough, and sometimes you need to see someone else go through it with you. And at the end of it, you need to accomplish something. I had climbed the summit by getting married before I even finished the game. Then I climbed another summit by graduating and ending up where I wanted to be in the games industry. And now I made up another summit, which is making money from YouTube. And look, I'm not gonna ask you to subscribe right now, okay? I'm not, seriously. But this is a long overdue thank you to the makers of Celeste for making this beautiful game. And especially to Lena Raine, whose music has been playing throughout this video. She's also the maker of the Celeste soundtrack, which has been playing throughout this video. And that's it. That's all for me. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Comment. I really want to see your comments. Bye bye.